XP versus milestone, which is better? I'll tell you the answer. Spoilers warning. It depends. It really depends.
Yeah.
So I personally feel that XP is a terrible system and can't think of many uses for it at all. But what's your take?
My
You
take
think
on
that
it
it's got
is-
uses?
So my take on it is it has ups and downs. So XP allows your party to keep better track, and basically, you know, as long as they're keeping track accurately, it allows them to go, hey, we're leveling up pretty soon. So it allows them to kind of keep better tabs. Plus, it also helps you as the game master kind of have more.
You can tally their success, their progress. It's something that's like mildly more tangible than just randomly being like, and you level up.
Yeah. Plus, it's kind of like, okay, I want, for a more inexperienced DM, it's an easier system for them to run because it also guides them on, okay, I'm going from level 1 to level 2, that's 300 XP. I want to do this in 3 encounters.
Well,
So
if
divide up those
if
encounters
CR
into
works
that.
properly, that makes sense.
Correct. Which CR, and we touched on this a bit before, where CR is a good starting point,
Mm-hmm. These are all
but you
guidelines.
have to know your group. And there's factors in the layout of the battlefield that affect how that CR is going to be affected.
Yeah.
But that's my, it has its benefits. The downsides of the XP system, in my mind, are there's an increased propensity in some people, if they have an XP system, to go murder hobo, which is basically any opportunity they can use to kill something and get XP, they do so.
Well, see, here's the thing, is that you could easily bypass that by not rewarding CR to certain things, such as killing NPCs.
Correct.
But that also denotes people of, like, if you've got a cave with a monster in it, people don't want to go in stealthily anymore. They just want to try and fight stuff. And making it more difficult or, like, impossible for them to win is not going to dissuade them.
No, it just makes it more enticing. And that's one of the reasons why, like, for a while I did if you happen to find a way around these bad guys, I'll grant you half XP.
Oh, half XP? No, that's not worth it at all.
Yeah. But the other downside is if you have people who aren't consistent, or you have somebody who might miss some XP that they should have logged or something, it does kind of create confusion.
I will say that I think that is something I do like, though, because there should be a way to reward people for not only playing and interacting and doing stuff, but also showing up and participating. So maybe just at the end of a session, you just allocate people getting XP based off of what they did. So if one person just went into town and bought, supplies, but one person, was crafting something, maybe they got a little bit more experience or something. I don't know. Like, there are, I think, better ways to award XP, which I think makes the XP system better, because in general, it's rule of thumb, you want the party to all be the same level, But I'm currently running a Friday game where we've got people that are kind of all over the place because there are people that are like saving up their XP to, they don't know what they want to build yet. They don't know what ability to buy or whatever. So a lot of them are stockpiling, and some of them have used up every ounce that they have. And, they're, all over the place. So allowing people to spend their XP however they want can, really give more ability to the player to kind of decide what they want to do and how they want to use it. It feels like in D&D we kind of are stuck behind this idea of we need to be as powerful as possible in order to take on what's next. And if I can cast, 3 spells instead of 2, then I just want to have that option under my belt. But honestly, how many spells do you cast each day, I don't think I've ever used up my spell slots in a day,
It does take quite a bit, and it's actually there. It's not something I've seen recently with the new changes, but there used to be a concept of like, for every long rest you have X number of encounters of a certain difficulty.
See, that just sounds like making an itinerary for your trip to Disneyland. We're going to have fun, and I've allocated when we're going to have fun.
Pretty much. And like I try to give the option of a rest if it fits within the storyline.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you're storming a castle, you just fought through a massive array of troops. Well, a long rest isn't going to be possible because you still have more troops ahead of you.
Not unless we barricaded the chamber and spent a little extra time or work doing something.
Exactly. At which point, you may end up having more struggle, because, oh look, the alarms, obviously they're going to be calling out for help.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have the chance that there's going to be more problems.
And I mean, rests are weird enough as it is. If, like, in the middle of someone's watch, they find like a monster, and it's like, oh man, if only you had 40 more minutes of rest, you would have gotten your 78 hit points back in your 3 health slots,
Yeah, I try not to do the whole, if you got just this little bit more. I try to do like, you can continue the long rest.
Correct.
I don't always...
And I think I've done that in my Curse of Strahd game, is that if I did ever interrupt a long rest, it was like an NPC coming in to talk, or like a monster being like, I'm looming. But I've never like given someone, another combat encounter just to like make it terrible for them. Because if you know how a game system works, it can be, fulfilling or not.
Yeah. Like I've done the action during a long rest, but I try to do it early on in the long rest. That way it doesn't actually interfere with the long rest. Or I'll do it like right at the end, so it's like, yeah, you're close enough, you're going to get the long rest. And I'll have it be something that's more low level, less threat to the actual party than like, I'm not going to have them, oh, we're taking a long rest, all of a sudden a dragon shows up. No, it's going to be something like a random souped up squirrel. So with a long rest, if I am going to disturb it, I try not to have it be a big fight, more of a low level, probably comedic relief type fight.
Mm-hmm. Like a squirrel came down and like stole someone's stone of far speech or something.
Kind of.
So maybe you do need to spend a spell slot or something, but then you guys can just get back to resting.
Exactly. And I don't actually like disrupt the long rest for that. So I have it be, yeah, your long rest kind of got interrupted, but you're able to resume it.
Mhm. Now, if you kill that squirrel, maybe you get 5 XP, or maybe you get 500 XP. And then everyone's like,
Yeah.
what? Why 500? Well, see, that was secretly a vampire that polymorphed into a squirrel. And so when you threw a rock on top of him, that actually crushed him.
I actually do have a stat block for a vampire squirrel that I've used in the past.
But like that is a way that you could use XP to be like, that was much more than you thought or whatever. Which is kind of metagaming, but is also can be a fun thing to do with world building and whatnot.
Yeah, that's one way you can use XP that I hadn't actually thought of. Because I've always looked at XP as kind of like outside the game, but when you think about it, XP makes sense from a roleplay perspective in a way, because as you are building your characters, like as your characters going around, they're going to get stronger and they're going to feel themselves getting stronger.
Mm.
But then again, that is just really playing into the levels. So,
right. It can just be, sometimes it forces you into this situation of, in order for people to have a fun encounter, I need to do a harder monster, which is not necessarily true. I'm like, but I did all the math. And I'm like, it can still not work out that way. So that's generally why I try to steer away from these like hard and strict rules. Because, and again, it really depends, because I feel that when we get into this rhythm, this system of like, this is how this works, this is how it's supposed to work, and then when it doesn't work, people get completely bent out of shape or so lost, don't know what to do, you know. And so I feel like it's sometimes better to just kind of jump in and be like, you know what, I'm gonna have them fight an alligator this week or whatever, because that could be an interesting encounter where maybe they have to kill the alligator, maybe they just have to retrieve an item. But it's like this whole thing of like, it's in the stream, so there's moving water. So if you want to do, you know, an area of effect spell, fire's not going to work. And if it's gas, it's going to get, you know, float away in the water, you know. So you've only got a few rounds of sleep before it like washes away or something, you know. I don't know. Like, I feel like there's more to encounters than just monsters in CR, and people just don't see it that way. They're like, here's the battle map, here's an empty space, and here's, you know, 3 goblins, you know? Where in actuality, goblins, you probably don't ever see them, you know? They're hiding in walls and, like, throwing rocks and spears at you and maybe set up a bunch of traps. And, you know, you go through this entire cave thinking that there's, like, 20 of them. And in fact, there's only 3. And you've just been, you know, they keep running away from you or something.
yeah, it's more, encounters, I believe, are more just part of the story. You know, it's you're telling an action fantasy story, not so much just tabletop strategy, bash at each other and, you know, see who wins.
Right.
So,
I'm just saying that if I want my party to go in, save the princess, and level up afterwards, I don't want to have to like fine-tune things to be like, well, this will give this much experience, and oh no, I'm not enough. Let me throw in someone's dog in order to reach the, you know, XP requirement or something.
yeah.
And then they end up not killing the dog, so they don't level up, and it's just like, oh, dang it. Well,
That's actually why the only reason that I even look at the CR is to basically ask, is this going to kill the party?
but
Because
I've just seen so many like ways that doesn't work, because, you know, a CR, you know, whatever horse, like 1 or something, could absolutely kill a party member if they used all of their attacks and, their things to, like, do that. But a horse wouldn't do that. A horse wouldn't think, cunningly, or use the game system to, like, do its multi-attack and then, dodge out of the way. It's just a horse. So you kind of have to play characters how they're supposed to be played, which is why a Bodak could, easily wipe, 4 level 5 party members, but it's not going to go after them. It's intended to be this, like, eerie thing that is just, like, in the distance, and maybe it startles you, or maybe it's guarding something, or you need to get past it. So it's a problem, but you don't have to face it head on. And that's how I feel like most situations go, is as soon as you hear roll initiative, it's kill or be killed time. I hate that. I hate that more than anything, which is why I try to avoid rolling initiative as much as possible. I'm just like, who wants to do something,
I've heard of various methods on initiative, but I think that'd be touching more into the encounter building side of things, which we kind of are already drifting into.
And I think we've touched on this briefly, and all of these things are roughly connected, so we keep coming back to them. But
but yeah, the XP has its ups and downs. The milestone system, in my mind, has also a series of ups and downs. But
what are the pros and cons that you can think of?
So the pros are your players don't need to worry about XP. You don't need to worry about XP.
Yeah.
So your players are going to be more focused on the story, and you're going to be more focused on the story.
Well, they're also going to be thinking more, specifically about, like, I need to complete this objective or this bounty. They're thinking about the end goals rather than just thinking about each specific individual action.
Which definitely helps in many cases. It helps reduce the murder hobo.
Also, it reduces the amount of work that players have to do. Because I gotta tell you, there's a lot of times that players don't even keep track of their own character sheet and require me to do that. And I'm like, that's not my job. You need to know what's on your character sheet.
The player to keep track of that.
Giving more work to players usually doesn't work very well. Which is why you also got to be careful about giving them too many items, or giving them too many spells, or, too many, quests.
Yeah, giving too many quests, like, I try to give, like, a few options.
And then once the options are chosen, we're just going to go in that direction until it's complete.
Because as you are pursuing one, depending on what that other option is, somebody else may resolve that.
Mm-hmm.
Since, while you're trying to go complete quest A, and quest B is, say, pirates.
Mm-hmm.
Well, another party may go out and deal with those pirates, or it could be the Royal Navy finds them and fights them and defeats them. Or it could be they just decide to retire because they've made enough money.
And that's something that I've also struggled with, especially as a new dungeon master, of having the idea of the world not revolving around the party. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but usually it just makes the party feel like they're moving too slow, or they're not important, or something. So I try not to make too much stuff happen outside of their purview, outside of their vision. If something comes up, I want them to be immediately aware of it, and I want their actions to have impact, because otherwise they'll just feel like it's not worth their time to invest into anything or do anything if that quest that they were going to get to next week after they leveled up is gone, then they usually don't feel good about it. So I've had to stop myself from like planning events or like a timeline of like, oh, this will happen if they don't get to it. I think stuff like that is cool, but generally not enjoyable to the group.
That's kind of why, like, I might do it early on or with lower level quests, but as to kind of show, like, hey, there's other things going on.
Mm-hmm.
But
or you could at least, like, warn them of like, this quest will expire in 2 weeks or something.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Generally speaking, the ones that I have that happen are ones that the party almost forgets about anyways.
I just remember I had this quest that was like, they needed to get enough money to like fix a cart so they could get to a destination so they could save a friend that was like kidnapped and taken out there. And like, they just dilly-dallied so long that I just had the mountain, blow up. And they're like, well, what are we even doing anymore? What's the, like, they had completely lost their objective, and they're like, oh, our friend out there? Oh, I guess he's just dead now. Rather than going to investigate, they just like completely gave up.
Yeah, see, in that case, my thought on that is, if you have someone who, like, you've set a timeline of, hey, at this point, they're going to be dead. Mm-hmm. After that point, if the party actually pursues that, have them find them dead.
Yeah. Yeah. But I did stuff like that in Curse of Strahd, too, of like, depending upon what you do, there will be actions, but also stuff is happening when you do not take action. And I think that worked okay in Curse of Strahd, but also Curse of Strahd was also a lot of terrible stuff already. So it just really fell apart that the party didn't feel like they were doing anything of value.
Yeah, you do have to, like, you have to meter it out where, like, at levels 1 through 4, the party is kind of, they're progressing fairly quickly. They're seeing progress. They're more focused on the smaller quests, so you can have more diversity going on, and it makes sense that there'd be more things that they would be handed for quests that would be solvable by others. But after you get past that point, like, in the player's handbook, it actually says like 1 through 4 is like threats to small villages.
Yeah.
5 through 10 is like threats to cities and countries. So if you're at a point where your party is dealing with things that are threatening to cities and countries, then it makes sense that they would be at a level where they're of selection for groups that control those cities and countries.
I will agree with the sentiment with that, but actually I'll just provide an alternative. Because let's say that you have a villain or something, someone that is exceedingly higher CR. And, this could be, a wizard or, like a demon king, or it could even be a Tarrasque. And it's just like something that's coming through. It will not see the party as a challenge, will not use all of its power, and will only basically be a nuisance by its presence. And then after a certain number of rounds, it may leave, or you are able to like dissuade it from like attacking or something. Like, basically all you have to do is hold off until it decides to leave or something. Doing something like that can sometimes be, less rewarding because you didn't get to beat it, but at least you get an idea of like what you're building towards. And so maybe by the time that you're level 10 and you encounter it again, you're like, all right, is he going to see us as a threat and kill us here and now? Or do we even stand a shot at like trying to beat him one-on-one? Like what's the thing here? So maybe you try to avoid encounters, or maybe you try to trap him, or like, do something outside of your level. It's this thing that prompts players to have an idea and a goal and something to build towards, while also giving them the idea of like what they have and their aptitude and capability, and then how they can adjust and grow from there.
I can definitely see that one, because like quite often I'm running with like, hey, there's like an adventurers guild available that you can use as a reference, and there's other elements in the world that you can use as a reference for like, hey, this is this. And I've actually done this guy is like, this character is designed to be fought at this level.
Mm-hmm.
And have the objective of the party be basically hold off as long as you can.
That's kind of how Curse of Strahd was, is that like every single time the party assisted someone or like succeeded at like purifying a place, Curse of Strahd was gonna show up, and he was gonna be either like, oh, you cool and pleasant fools, you can try as you might, but you'll never win against me, and then he leaves. Or maybe he comes in and like messes with something by like, causing a building to collapse and, giving us a new problem or something. But like he never comes in to completely kill the party or like stop them. He's just there to show up his presence. And so what you can do is maybe plan for the next encounter, is like, as soon as you save the old lady, you've got a trap plan for him and you try to catch Strahd. Or, you continuously try harder and harder to fight him. But also in general, he will just be at his castle. So you can either go straight to his castle or go around and do all the side quests before the main objective. So having a world like that, I think, can be very nice and useful. But it really depends on the party, because I think that's something that I didn't provide or like provoke very well with how I ran that campaign, and I will admit that I think I did that very badly. But I had this idea in my head, this story, of like, these things do this and whatnot, and I just think I was too vague or like mysterious with it, and nobody ever cared enough to investigate the story behind things or the mystery.
Well, I mean, a lot of that was the party you had and the party you were working with, and struggling to find the balance for that party. And realistically, like, you adapted pretty well with that.
From my experience, the only thing that I've ever suffered as a game master is when I start losing players or gaining new players, or both. Of like,
that's
one, how do you balance that? How do you restart the story? How do you introduce people halfway? It's just a nightmare.
So finding the new balance with the new group is always going to be a struggle, because anytime you add or subtract or anything like that,
it's like session one all over again,
basically. But it doesn't, like, there's still elements that you have available. So if you're losing a player, it's from the DM perspective. Now you just have to weaken things to kind of balance that out. But at the same time, it's gaining the player that's going to be the more struggle, because it's still, either way, you're finding the new balance for the party.
Right. You've got to get yourself introduced to them, get them knowing the party and what's going on and how this campaign's going to run. And all this other stuff, and then you're also meeting a new person, you're getting a read on them and how they're gonna fit in, and
Exactly.
it's just adding more monkey wrenches to monkey wrench stew.
So for the first session or two, maybe even 3 or 4, the first few encounters, you're going to be kind of getting a new gauge of, okay, this is what the party is capable of now.
Right.
And
do you think it's harder to run encounters with low-level players or high-level characters?
so I think it's harder to run with high-level characters.
I agree. I think low
The
levels
re-
are much easier to do because options a little bit less, math to figure out who's going to be able to do what.
Oh yeah. There's less variables for who's going to do what. There's more options on what you can throw at the party that make logical sense, that can possibly, if you're looking to challenge the party a little bit, you can challenge them easier. I've seen level 12, 13 parties that are taking on CR 20 to 25
Mhm.
monsters. And it's like, how can you challenge them without pulling out something that doesn't make sense
I
in most storylines?
Yeah. I had a friend that was like, I need to have combat every session, and my players always destroy everything I bring them, so I'm going to bring something even bigger and badder this next session. And it got to the point where they had to start using, like, AI to start coming up with homebrew monsters because there was just nothing that could challenge the party. And I remember joining in for my first time, and again, I was fairly inexperienced. I think this was like one of my first games I ever played in. So I didn't even know what my character was. I didn't know how it worked. And it was like, and you guys are heading towards this quarry, they're having some trouble with their workers. You need to get this like andesite out of there. And hey, there's a dragon for no reason. But it's not just any dragon. It's like a dragon that had like acid blood or something. And it swoops in one turn and just does 5 attacks on all of you. And everyone was fine.
That doesn't make any sense.
I know.
From a storyline perspective.
Yeah.
And that's something I think I've said literally every single episode of this. The storyline, like, encounters need to fit the story.
And that's why goblins are kind of just widely accepted, that they're just an invasive species that lives everywhere, so you can just use them whenever. But honestly, I think it's more upsetting to have like a monster that doesn't make sense, even if it like matches the party or whatever. Because you would never put your party up against like 15 horses. That's just not like
No.
mathematically it's the perfect encounter, but it doesn't make any sense unless, and again, this is the reason why I don't like CR and XP, is that unless your encounter is not to kill them, it's to corral them. A wild stampede is happening across the countryside. It's destroying people's crops. It's blowing through towns. It's a real nuisance. It's a problem. We need to stop them. The easiest thing to do would just be a fireball, right? Well, maybe you could tame these horses. Maybe you could talk to them. You could learn that they're, angry that the white man has encroached onto their land, and so the wild spirits are, doing a thing. Or maybe there's like, I don't know, some sort of like bug that's like controlling the horse leader. So if your druid could like 1v1 the other horse as a horse and like gain the pack leadership, like there's just so much more to an encounter that can be done that's outside of the math. And I think that's what's most important to encounters and whatnot. And your character growth and XP and whatnot is all well and good, but the point behind this game is about the stories, the experiences, the things that you guys do. Maybe it's something that you learn, it's a mystery that you solve, or maybe it is a creature that you fight, or it's just a place that you reach, you know. Lord of the Rings is like 90% walking and like 10% fighting, you know.
Seriously, like it. I've
And
read
that's
the book.
realistic. A lot of it is going to be like sitting down and talking with the leaders, and like we need to get a liaison to this place, you know, for like safe, you know, communications, because we don't want war or whatnot.
Like, I think the average soldier in World War II, the average frontline soldier in World War II was like, in an entire year, they might have like 30 days of fighting.
Yeah, just
So,
sitting in the trenches, holding the line.
pretty much. I mean,
What's
Vietnam was a whole different ballgame, but
yeah? What's your example for like a good low level encounter? Or actually, how about the first encounter? Whether or not the party knows each other yet or not. What's a good first encounter for a campaign?
I have a couple of fallbacks that I've developed over the years. Of you can have of there's some wolves that are they're taking some chickens from a farm.
Mm-hmm.
There's a low level bear, like a black bear, I believe is the lowest one. You do one of those. The wolves you can have a few, but the bear you only do one. And this bear has been causing trouble for some outcropping village somewhere, or you've heard that this bear is
So you
somehow
have to kill it.
not necessarily.
Okay, because that's what it seems like you're leaning towards.
So, generally speaking, when I build an encounter, yes, my primary thought is, you know, if the party decides to kill this thing.
Mm.
I never ever really leave them no option but to kill.
And I mean, you can always change it after the fact. Like, you know, the
Exactly.
party picks up a quest to like go hunt out this bear, and then one of them goes up to them and speaks bear, and he's like, "You seem pretty reasonable. Are you going around killing people?" And the bear could either be like, "Yes, I'm evil, you have to kill me," or they could be like, no, I've actually been staying in my cave because I fear that there is some other, you know, threat nearby. And maybe it's like, I don't know, there's like a demon portal and they're coming in like doing something. Or maybe there's, you know, this guy that's living out in the woods and there's rumors that there's a beast lurking around his place. He's a werewolf, basically. Or, you know, you could like tie it in and like further lead on to something else. And again, this is an idea that I've always loved of like, if they don't go towards the plot, you can just move the plot to where you want it to be.
Oh yeah, and you know, if
I just love
you know,
tying things together, no matter what it is.
oh yeah, and having a party member who, you know, for some reason ends up speaking bear, talking to the bear, and you know, finding a way around that bear being a threat to the villagers or being perceived as a threat to the villagers. That allows you as the DM to improvise.
Not every encounter has to be solved with violence, but also not every encounter should be allowed to be solved with diplomacy. You know,
Exactly.
there needs to be a good medium of like, hey, you could at least try diplomacy first and then, switch into fighter mode if you have to. But also, sometimes you just know that it's a bad idea to make yourself known first. Sometimes you gotta rush in there or whatnot.
Yeah, sometimes the bandits start by shooting at you,
Mm-hmm.
which is another. The bandit is another possible first encounter where you have like one or two bandits. It's enough to kind of get everyone worked together while still allowing you to start telling the story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things of like, if I'm throwing bandits out there, that means that there's a criminal element out there. If I'm throwing animals out there, that means the animals aren't as fully controlled as they could be.
Mm-hmm.
There's subtle context to every encounter, to every element that you may say or have happen, or that you can easily weave into a bigger story if you really think about it.
Yeah. And if there's a bear wandering around killing people, maybe you find a rune on its neck, or maybe you find like a dragon that was in its old cave, or the bandits were only stealing stuff because a wizard came by and took all of their stuff, or they had a contract to steal something from a village. They don't know, it was just an old, keepsake, but it's secretly a talisman or something. Like, you can be constantly growing the campaign and the story that's not just tied to like, this is a campaign, or this is an encounter, you fight them, you win, we move on.
Yeah. Yes, I believe it's good to have an encounter every now and then that is that. But the majority of the hard encounters, you should have tied into the story.
Right. And again, not that everything needs to be connected, but like, for the most part, you want to at least be trying to have everything connected, because they'll probably miss something, or they'll forget, So just always be in general of like constantly moving towards this goal of, there is, some wizard that's messing with this whole part of the mountainside. And you just see it slowly, pieces here and there of every encounter that they do.
Yeah, or there's a criminal underworld that the party may not find out about the full criminal underworld until they're level 6 or 7. But they might see subtle hints, subtle clues about it.
Yeah, maybe they like steal a piece of bandit armor, and then someone comes by them in the city and says like, "Oh, I recognize you," or whatever, and
Or, "Oh, I see you're wearing the sigil of Lord Blackwater."
Mm-hmm. You coming to the meeting tonight? What meeting? You didn't know that there's a meeting tonight? Here, it's at this place and this, like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like, there's not always a story with something, but you can easily make a story with a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. Even if it is just like a side venture of just like, maybe you avenge this one guy's family that died when you found his body or whatever. And like, it goes no deeper than that. It maybe doesn't even give you a reward other than a sense of satisfaction. But like, you can always be throwing in stuff.
Oh yeah. And there's nothing wrong with having story arcs. I actually try to, like my current Saturday Night campaign, I'm trying to have story arcs where throughout each arc you have one character getting more character development. The other character's still developing, but this one's kind of like, this is the quest for this character's development, then we move on to the next one, ultimately building up to the big story of getting to the main objective.
I have a caveat to that, because this is something that I've noticed as both a player and a dungeon master, is that sometimes when you make a part of the story too much about one character and the rest of the players that's just with that character, it makes it not as fun. Where it could be cool to that one player, but they also can start to feel like maybe they're hogging the spotlight too much, and the rest of the players can start to feel like, you know, this game feels like it's mostly about this one person and not about us as a group or whole or whatnot. And it could be something as simple as like, you know, this person came from, you know, a royal line, or they were secretly a demigod and they didn't know until, you know, their, you know, spirit mother came down or something. Or, you know, there's a person that wants to kidnap them or whatever, and they're constantly showing up. Like, those can be fun and interesting things for like world development, and it's always cool to like tie characters into stuff, but it's also even much more, you know, prevalent to allow players to make those decisions, where they're like, you know what, I want to join this fight club, or I want to save this forest. You know, if you allow them to like choose those decisions for their own, and allow them to be like, hey, party members, will you assist me with this, rather than making the decision for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And, you know, the one thing that I've used in the past to kind of try to help balance it is kind of having, okay, this, you know, this element of this player's character, this element of this character is here, this element of this character is here. And like,
And as I explore the world,
quest thing with trying to change the mind of the temple, we've got a player character who meets somebody from their past, and you know, there is, of course, like you said, having the player's decision.
mm-hmm.
So,
and this is why having counters that aren't all about, you know, leveling up or getting loot or XP or something, not having that like measure of success that's always, you know, in the back of your mind, I feel like is a better way to run campaigns, which is why I try not to use those.
Yeah, and that's one of the big advantages to CR is you can set, okay, I've got these set points I'm planning, and you can go, well, you know, this is the next big thing that makes sense, that they like the big, you know, say they rescue their friend and get back to their main land, and they've overthrown this evil ruler. That makes sense as a checkpoint for them to level up.
Mm-hmm. I will say that when I do milestones, it's usually never a checkpoint that I had planned of like, oh, as soon as they, you know, make their way out of the haunted mansion, then I'll level them up. It's usually when we've progressed enough and the party members have done a bunch of things, and I usually try to not make it more than like 10 sessions at a time or something. You know, I will try to mentally keep some sort of mathematical account, but usually it's whenever I see them complete something that they themselves are like confident or, you know, happy about, of like, you know what, I feel like we did good this session or something, you know. And that could be, you know, them just, you know, making it up a flight of stairs, you know.
Yeah.
It could be as simple as that, or it could be them just like making their way out into the desert and not even like completing the dungeon yet or something. You know, these milestones don't have to be equated to completing an objective necessarily.
No.
Sometimes they can, but sometimes just like unlocking a new chapter or, you know, discovering a new place. Yeah. Those could be points where you let people level up.
Exactly. And like The set milestones that I have for the Saturday night campaign are when you buy a ship, when you leave on the ship, when you land, and when you leave.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the 4 set milestones that I had set early on.
Well,
And
what if
all
we
the rest
never
at
buy a
this
ship,
point,
but we do make it to a new place? Do we just miss that? Like, what if we teleported or we got swooped up by a pterodactyl?
if you basically, that's where the improvisation comes into play.
Okay.
Where it's
Because
like,
I
if you
understand that it
somehow
is
find a
an important
way,
milestone. Like, it to be able to have gotten that money, made enough friends, hired people
yeah,
or whatever, and like we are it because it feels like a chapter change. It feels like we're
that
making progression in the story, and that's where a milestone should be.
exactly. And that's really where, like, that's when I try to put them,
Hmm.
when it's like, hey, this is it, this is the next chapter of the story. So it could be, hey, we got this quest, we're gonna go, we're gonna set off and we're going to go help rescue X person that is a relative of the party, or we're gonna go fight this person that, we're gonna go try to dethrone this person, or we're gonna go try to solve
Hmm.
this plague that,
We've completed something. We've had that moment of like,
yeah.
yes, yes. We're moving
But
forward. We've made progress. That sensation.
it yeah, it's the end of an old chapter, beginning of a new.
Counterpoint, and this is something that I did in the Curse of Strahd that you may remember, is that I let people level up before encounters because I was going to be like, this is going to be a milestone, this is something that's going to happen. Win or lose, we're going to get something out of this. This is going to be a change in the story. And I had this idea of, when you level up, you always want to like use your skills, you're eager for that next encounter, and that may not come for a while. So, especially in Curse of Strahd, where you're mostly just struggling to survive, and by the time that you do level up, you're like, man, am I eager for an encounter? So I let people level up so that they could use their brand new abilities and test some stuff out in the next session. And sometimes that was a cool thing because I got to be like, ooh, get ready because there's an encounter coming up. Like sometimes I wouldn't even tell people. I would just be like, hey, level up this session. And like, oh no, that means that there's going to be a milestone next session.
Mhm.
And they didn't know what it was. That it could be anything. But
That is a very useful tool.
it's a world building thing, and it's also an excitement thing where
Hmm.
I tend to leave off on cliffhangers and like start off with uh, illusion things or whatever to like get people hooked back in, and also just to get people excited for the next session in hopes that they show up. Doesn't always work, but what do you think about something like that? I know that that's pretty much counterintuitive to the whole point of leveling and like balancing and CR and XP and everything. So how do you feel about that?
It, for me, that's one of those things where I've actually done it. It's not something I use frequently,
No.
but I've actually planned, okay, I need the party to be at this level for facing this guy.
Hmm.
So I've actually done the I'm actually done the make sure they're at this level. So having them level up before the encounter, that can be a useful tool, especially if you're on a checkpoint system or a milestone system
Hmm.
where you want that BBEG, big bad evil guy, to be a challenge up until a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
Or you want them to be very hard to beat up until that point, where, and that point be the threshold where the party now feels confident enough to be able to take them on.
Right. And I mean, encounters are definitely something that we could go on for hours and hours about different things for different reasons. But
oh yeah,
one of the things I just quickly wanted to add is that the cool thing about giving level ups before an encounter is that it's kind of like giving a level up in an encounter. So, you know, maybe you're doing like a level 2, you know, party, and then like you have them level up at the end of the session before the next session, because the next session they're gonna fight against something, and maybe that's when the cleric, you know, calls in, you know, is like, in my desperate hour I need your help, and then he like channels divinity for the first time, and it's like this cool sweeping, you know, moment of like narrative, like development in a character or something, you know.
Yeah. That's actually a really good point with this, because encounters are to help tell the story. So having it be before the fight in that particular instance can help tell the story. There's other times when having it happen after the fight can help tell the story, because you've learned the lessons of the fight. You've figured out, okay, this guy is, you know, his techniques are like this. I've learned a few new techniques from him by studying his techniques.
And I guess that's what makes sense to level up after fighting, because you've gained experience from that.
Yeah.
I just think it's cool for like the fighter to go toe to toe with the vampire, and then as the vampire, you know, gets halted by the blade, he looks at him and he's close enough to bite him, and then the fighter goes for his second attack, which he just got with this level up, and then it's like this cool moment of like, not this time, and then he like Dooku slices off his head.
Yeah, it's, each one has it depends on what fits the story at that time.
Hey, it depends. It really depends.
That's gonna be like our slogan.
I mean, it's the honest truth, is that you always have to think about so many different things. There's not just like one piece of advice that like blanket is good for everything, because you have to think about your players, you have to think about the characters, the campaign, the story, you know, the encounters. So many different variables that can be so completely different, and you just kind of got to figure out what you want to do and what works for you. And maybe you have players that don't like that, and so they leave, and maybe you got players that do like that, and so they stick around. And that's kind of where I'm at, where honestly my players really aren't interested in leveling up or items or like, you know, getting something done or whatnot. They're just kind of here for the story that I'm presenting and letting them do the actions that like they want to do with their characters. So there honestly is more role play than actual like game mechanics in my sessions, and personally I feel like that's the way it should be, but that's also not necessarily true. I think everyone has a different way of doing stuff, so my advice is not to be taken as gospel or like, you know, the perfect example. You know, you need to figure out what works for you, you know?
It's you have to figure out what works for you and your party.
Right. Because heavens knows I've had players that don't like the way I run games. And that's fine.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I've had parties that they wanted to be murder hobo. They wanted every encounter. They wanted an encounter every single session. And it's like, okay, we can do that. I've had parties that didn't even care about the mechanics of the I say what I want to do, and they just create a monkey out of thin air,
Mm-hmm.
which that's a full fun story. Um, but it's what works for your party, because some parties are that complete off the wall with role playing to a point where sometimes throwing out most of the rules is more beneficial. Other times you're going to have those parties that, you know what, they just want to have the fight. So it's finding that balance of role play and action for your party, and then telling the story with that.
Mm-hmm. Because there have also
Because
been times where
inevitably-
I've just been talking too much because I'm trying to fill in dead air because nobody else wants to talk. And I'm like, are we playing a game or are we just sitting here and listening to story time? You know?
Yeah. Is this a game or an audiobook?
Exactly. Because I felt like that. And I'm like, should I be talking less? And they're like, no, I wish you would talk more so I don't have to do anything. And I'm like, then why are you here? You know? So, yeah.
Yeah, there is like there's a point where the DM does need to step back and let the role players role play. And if they aren't role playing, then there is that point where it's,
But if I'm role playing, I'm not earning
play a role
experience.
playing game? Yeah.
I'm not interested in role play. I just want to kill stuff. That's the only way to earn XP.
Yeah, that's the point where it's like, okay, now, you know, there is a place for that style of play,
Mm.
but honestly, with a more murder hobo group where it's, they don't care about the story, they just want to fight, those are the groups that I tend to put so little story into.
Right. Because they're not interested.
Yeah, it's literally just enough story to tie the fights together.
And here's a really great thing that I'm actually super proud of. I have people in my server that are like, I like your games. I want to try doing it, but I want to do it different. And I'm like, perfect. You see something about my campaigns that you know didn't necessarily enjoy, something that you wanted to try doing but didn't work for it. Go ahead and make your own thing. So I've got, you know, someone that's running a Thursday campaign that it's all about, like, you know, these people in a monastery doing like 1v1, like very respectable battles or whatnot. So it's very quick action, you know, a lot of movement and combat and whatnot. But then it's just kind of like traveling around and not really story, not really exploring or anything. And then there's another guy doing a Sunday game that it's all about like zombie apocalypse, everyone's undead, and you're just like someone working for, you know, a lich and a necromancer. You know, like, you got to do his bidding, you got to go kill other monsters, gather resources, craft them together, make yourself stronger. And it's just like, oh my goodness, these are like so very interesting and wild, and also a lot for your first time. But also I love to see that drive and that creativity of, like, you know, I like to run, you know, games that's about mystery and story and talking to people. And I think it's great that people aren't interested in that, or maybe fed up with me being the only person running games and those are the only options. So they're doing the thing and stepping up and making their own games. Because that's how it was for me, is that, you know, there wasn't any games for me to play, and so I'm going to make the game that I wanted to play, and I'm just here to see who wants to play it too.
Oh yeah, I am absolutely ecstatic to hear when somebody's like, "Hey, I want to develop my own thing."
Mm-hmm.
I have someone that I play on Thursday nights with. I was a DM for that group, and now I'm a player because we rotate DMs. And they came to me and they're like, "Hey, you know, I have a story idea. Can you help me piece this into a game?" It's like, yeah, And they just needed like rules mechanics help. They didn't need much more than that. And they have a great story. It's fun, it's interesting. It's like there's an island with magical plants, and the natives have kind of learned how to live with that. It's like that's a, it's a fun story, and it's something I couldn't run because my imagination doesn't go that direction.
Yeah. But like maybe you get experience in that game by like, only discovering places. So, you've got like this big old map and it's all dark and you have to like through fog of war you have to go discover things, and maybe that's how you get XP or milestones or whatever. Or maybe you have to fight people, and when you fight the people in the like Bushido kind of game or whatever, you get experience every time you do that. So maybe there's like 6 combats in like one session, but they're all 1v1s and they're very quick, they're honorable, and you don't have to go to like 0 hit points or expend all your resources or whatever. It's just like fighting to get experience. Or maybe you're just gathering resources and growing, and leveling up does something, but also just like improving your character, whether you're crafting something or getting loot, or there's different ways to grow that's not just leveling up. That's all I'm trying to say.
You could be gathering armor, you could be gaining a feat, you could be learning a new language. It's not just about the raw levels, it's about the additional stuff off to the side. And that's another reason why I find the alternative system to be interesting, and the Bastion system to be interesting, because it's trying to encourage players to return to a hub and spend time at that hub. And that they could also be spending doing things like mastering a new weapon, or learning a new language, or maybe learning a skill. Like the rogue might teach the barbarian how to pick a lock.
Yeah. And so, it harkens back to this idea of like, whether you do XP or milestone, there are other things that you can do to warrant success, such as getting an ally, a familiar, an NPC sidekick, getting a vehicle or a base, or money or loot. It doesn't always have to be experience. There are different things that you can do to reward people for achieving something. But also, that's not to say that you can't just let people do stuff, and sometimes there isn't a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, because either there's a dragon there and it's part of the plot, or they were just going off on a wild goose chase and you're trying to get them to focus on stuff that you want to reward them for. So you don't always have to use the carrot on the stick. Sometimes you can just have just the stick, if you know what I mean. But like, get back on track.
Sometimes all 3 iterations of the carrot on a stick work, depending on the situation. You have just the stick, the carrot on a stick, or just the carrot.
Because if you have just the carrot, well, then they're just going to eat that and be done. So you're going to have to get more carrots. If you use just the stick, all they're going to do is run away from you. But if you use the carrot on the stick, then you can lead them.
Yeah. It's which one are you looking to do?
Mm-hmm. So if you just want to reward them every session that they show up, that's fine. If you want to like lead them on a long and arduous journey for a few sessions before you give them anything, that may work too. I don't know. It depends.
Yeah. And depending on what you're looking at, there's other things that can kind of help build a party up. Mm-hmm. There's, you can give them magical items, you can give them skills, you can give them titles.
Ooh, yeah. We should talk about that next session or something. Because there's a thing
Yeah.
that I like to do, such as giving people achievements, and then those achievements have like bonuses.
Yeah. Achievements. There's uh feats
Mm-hmm.
are another thing.
Yeah, that's what I did in the Curse of Strahd game. There was like this guy that was teaching one of the players different skills, and I just gave them through feats.
Mhm. Yep. I remember the monk in that got like defense,
Mm-hmm.
like a defensive fighting thing.
I made
I
all
forget
of
which
the
it was
hidden
exactly.
sword skills from Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess. Those are all feats.
Hey, if it works, it works. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, sometimes non-magical equipment or you know currency, XP, sometimes that works, but it can also feel kind of bland. So it's how much of a reward do you want to do and how creative do you want to get?
I mean, locations
So
can be rewards too. Of like, they find a
Mhm.
magical spring that like has lesser restoration on it, so you could bottle it, but then you have to run it to town to sell it or something before it goes bad. Or you just know that this is a place that you can come back to later, you know. Or
Yeah.
maybe you find an abyssal
Uh,
forge or something, or like a golden temple that you couldn't possibly take all this with you, but you can always come
yeah,
back here or something.
exactly. There's always some different way that you can do it.
Hmm.
And my thoughts on like sometimes my biggest thing when I give rewards is sometimes I under reward
Hmm.
because like okay, I don't want to break the game, but at the same time I want to give them something cool.
Here's one final thing that I'll say before we start to wrap up is that some people are interested in loot, some people are interested in crafting, some people are just interested in fighting, and some people aren't interested in any of that. And so it can be very
Yep.
difficult to find like something unique that like rewards people other than leveling up. So I understand that that is a thing, but it can also be okay that not everyone is interested in the magic tomes in this library. The barbarian just wants to get out
Yeah.
of here and go do something else. That's
Yeah.
understandable. So giving a reward to people can come in different shapes and sizes, and the most universal shape is leveling up. But sometimes giving people a level up or a magic item out of nowhere that they didn't ask for or they didn't earn can almost be more debilitating than not getting something after they've achieved something financial or substantial, excuse me. So
Yeah.
it's less of a matter of you need this, so I'm going to give it to you, and it's more of like, you have earned this. That's what's most important about providing rewards.
Yeah, I think having it be you've earned this is definitely important
Right.
because if it's you need this, like there's some sort of disconnect that's happened.
Hmm.
And I'm not against, as a DM, noticing, hey, this player character is weak in this way.
Well, let me just
I
fix your
can,
character for you since your character's broken. Let me just give you something to make your character better. You know.
if
That's
it's
why it's so
done
much better
right,
to just
though.
give someone money so that they can buy their own thing, or experience so that they can level up the character they want, rather than giving them something like this, wizard cast this spell on you to give you 300 health because you need it,
Yeah.
because you die a lot, because you need it. Sometimes that can make a player feel like, oh, Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I made my character bad or whatever. You know? So, like,
Yeah.
sometimes even giving
I
loot
can
can
see
be
that.
difficult too, which is why it's like, I'm not giving you this +3 chest plate because the fighter needs it. I'm giving it to you because you actually defeated, like, this animated suit of armor that was built by an expert craftsman. That's why you've got it. Not because it's something that the party needs. And this is why, you know, having random loot or loot tied to an area rather than trying to give stuff that you think the party wants or needs is better.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely want to have the loot make sense.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, I've killed an alligator and there's like, oh my goodness, there's like gold chest plate in here. Like, what the heck?
yeah. You know, why wasn't the alligator wearing this?
Exactly. Oh. So I loot the Minotaur. It's got 300 Bitcoin on him. Why did he have that?
Yeah.
He was a stock investor. I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
and that's also something that I want to talk about in another episode of like giving monsters stories, like giving them, you know, reasons for being where they are, doing what they're doing, more than just like they are something to fight. But we've gone on long enough. We can talk about that in another episode. What do you have any final
sounds like a
thoughts?
good one. Honestly, I think we've covered it.
All right, which is better, XP or milestone?
Depends on what you're doing.
Yeah, I knew it.
And
That's what I said at the beginning of the session. It depends, everybody. It really depends.
it really does. If I had to choose one or the other, like Hard Knocks, had to choose, I would say Milestone, because it allows the story to be more in focus.
Right, which I think is what it's supposed to be. I understand the point behind experience and CR, where they're, and I don't mean this to sound rude when I say crutches, but they are like basically something that people can use when they're like, I'm not creative, I'm not sure what to do, so these are like a skill and a tool that you can use to be like, I have a mathematical mind, let me figure this stuff out. And it works for some people. I understand that. I'm not saying that those things are bad or that they don't work. I'm just saying that I don't enjoy them.
Yeah. Whereas, for me, the CR, I use it. XP, hit and miss.
Yeah.